as you mentioned, I've actually went through Burnout at least 3 times. I always like to use the word at least because I do sometimes still catch myself, sometimes going into maybe the beginning part of the burnout if I'm not careful.
Hello everyone, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of
Spill the Tea with THG.
And we would like to take this opportunity to really thank our listeners on Facebook, Instagram and Spotify for helping us reach 1,000 views for our last episode on travel. So do continue to tune into us on Spotify.
And catch us on Instagram and Facebook.
And once again, let us introduce ourselves. I'm XY.
And I'm Genevieve.
And today we are so happy to actually have a guest join us, and his name is James. Hello, James.
Hello, everyone. James.
Hello. And for today, we are going to talk about a topic that I think it's one of the blooming topics right now in the society, and that is on burnt out, right? And why James is such an important person to as a professional to come and talk about burnout, because James is the lead Thrive synergist and founder of Emmaus Strategies, and he himself is a social worker by profession, and he has a passion for helping people and organizations grow and thrive for good. So together with his team in Emmaus, they provide talks as well as training and consultancy services to grow good in people and organizations, right? And having experienced burnout himself and overcoming burnout for about 3 times now, right? Wow. He's now on a social mission through Emmaus to help others prevent and overcome burnout. And that is just an amazing way for you to give back to the society.
Thank you for that. Thank
yeah.
you.
Just share with us a little bit about your experience, perhaps when you're going through the whole experience of burnout.
Well, I actually was, as you mentioned, I've actually went through burnout at least 3 times. I always like to use the word at least because I do sometimes still catch myself, sometimes going into maybe the beginning part of the burnout if I'm not careful. But the only thing now is that I'm actually much more aware, and I'm able to catch that early and address it. But definitely, it's something that's it's no fun because kind of like you really dread waking up and you just feel that every day, and even by the end of every day, you just feel so worn and so tired. And I was actually even having falling sick more often that time. I remember within the span of my second burnout, within the span of about a month, I've actually went into hospital twice. I was actually admitted twice. And then one of my friend, my ex-colleague, just jokingly mentions that I think you're overworked. But interestingly, that joke actually made me think, and says, I think there's some truth to that, the fact that I'm falling sick, I'm feeling so negative about it, and, really dreading each day. Sometimes asking questions about, so what's the meaning of all this? Why am I going through all this? But I guess that really started me on the journey of really, coming to terms that I might be burnout and actually doing something about it. Yeah, and interestingly, the second burnout was also the one that actually kind of like pushed me and propelled me to do what I'm currently doing. Right. Having a burden for people who are actually also burning out as well, to actually also share about what I found help, so here I am.
Right.
Yeah.
So actually, you tell us about all this, your experience with it, but what exactly is burnout? What do you...
Yeah, I guess a lot of people actually want to find out what burnout is, and so one thing, the first distinction that a lot of people wants to make is the difference between stress and burnout. Burnout is basically stress on overdrive. Because people do say that stress is actually good in a certain sense, because stress do actually put you in a situation where you actually want to do better and all that. But I think if you put yourself under a long period of stress, very prolonged period of stress, or what they call chronic stress, that will start to actually give rise to quite a bit of symptoms. I mean, some things that you will find out. Like, for example, you could find out that you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, or like me, for example, you could be falling sick very often. And some other telltale signs would include things like very negative evaluation of yourself. That means you may feel very negative for yourself, or you might be very good at doing something, and even other people tell you you're so good at it, but you just feel so inadequate. You just feel you're not confident at all. And I think one most important thing is also you find yourself really isolating yourself. You don't really want to have social contact with people. There could be cynicism, very ill feeling, towards others. There could be a rise in conflicts. So we usually tell people that if you do experience some of these things in combination, because of a prolonged period of stress, you could be burnt out. And it's actually time for you to actually start looking into it and really seeing what you can do about it.
Right. And those symptoms that you have mentioned, they are actually quite common in especially in our modern day life in Singapore here. And I think it's easy to say that, I am being burnt out. But how far will you actually go with before saying that I'm actually burnt out? Or what is your, like you're mentioning about the different combinations of different things, and that could be burnout for that person, right? But what makes for you, for example, when you have gone through the 3 times of burnout, what makes you think that, okay, this is where it's burnout for me, I need to stop and do some rectifications of my life?
I think the turning point should be when you start realizing how this is really affecting your life.
Right.
It's affecting you. I always tell people that burnout is not something that happens to you, like for example at work, because a lot of people think that burnout it's what happens at workplace. But if you think about it, it actually affects your whole outlook of life. It affects, you will bring that back into your relationships, whether is it with your girlfriend, with your boyfriends, or your husband, your wife, and it affects your health. And I think when that happens, it's really high time you need to do something about it, because I don't think we should look at it in terms of like saying just diagnosing ourselves whether we have burnout, but just using it as a kind of a litmus test, see whether or not whether it's time for us to really examine what we are going through, and what can we do about it to kind of like fight the ill effects of it.
Right.
Like, so what you're talking about, like the symptoms, they actually do feel very similar towards like depression in a sense, especially the cynicism and like the isolation and the feeling very down and feel very bad about yourself. Is there like a clear distinction? Like, is there a difference between burnout and like depression?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you asked that question, because I think some people actually do ask also, like, what's the difference between depression and burnout? And these are 2 very distinct things. But interestingly, there is a study that was, there was a paper in last year that actually looked into the 2, and they have actually found that if you are actually experiencing burnout and if you do not do anything about it, it could actually develop into depression. So I think they term it as the classic unfolding of depression, which is all the more why I think it's important that when we start to see that we might be experiencing symptoms of burnout, it's time for us to do something before it blows up, into, for example, depression. Depression, I think, is just one of the mental health challenges that people will face, because I think that particular paper did also, I think it's a paper that also talk about how it's also associated with other mental health conditions as well. It could be like, for example, anxiety disorders, and other things lah. Yeah.
So I have a burning question about burnout.
Yes.
Yeah. So after if I'm going through a burnout, what is the healing process like for me? Or let's say if someone goes to your team and said, "Hey, I'm burnt out," what would you do to help them overcome that situation? I
believe the process of recovery would definitely first involve awareness first, that you could be burning out. Self-awareness is very important, and that's also the reason why in kind of like the work that we do, with people who are burning out, or even talking about preventing burnout. One of the things, the intervention tool, the strategy we use is actually talks first, because I think we need to get a message out to people to actually understand what burnout is, and for people to take stock and to know that, because you need to know that you're burning out before you can do something about it, or even you want to do something about it. So I would say the first step is really first awareness first, and then you will kind of like go through a process of very deep work. I've always joked with people who says that it takes more than vacations to actually overcome burnout, because I'm stressed, I'm burnt out, and I just go and take vacation.
Yeah, there's always the natural solution.
Yeah.
I need to get out of this place to actually do a vacation or something. But
Yeah.
after that, I come back, I'm still burnt out.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
really solve the problem.
Correct. That's why someone actually ever once joked before that I need a 6 months vacation twice a year. I think you've heard that before, right?
Yeah.
I like that too. Yeah. But I think the thing about burnout is that it requires really very very deep and intentional work, and it's not things things like going for holidays, or some people they love to go for their creature comforts, of going for massages and all that, listening to music. These are all fine, but I just term them as just temporary relief. It's just stress relief strategies. They don't do anything about preventing burnout. And so we need to really look into what changes need to happen, and that requires really a little bit of deeper work, more than definitely just vacations and all that lah. And so we actually do guide people through a process using kind of a model that we developed to provide like handles for people to look at which aspects of their life may need work.
I see.
So like, what exactly what exactly what exactly can somebody do to actually prevent burnout?
Okay, so so it kind of like the model that we developed is actually called the prism model.
Okay.
PRISM. So if you know a prism is like a triangle where light shines through and a beautiful spectrum comes out. So we kind of use that as acronym to help people understand what they can do to prevent and overcome burnout. So P stands for personal mastery. A lot of work needs to be done in terms of you, whether can you actually regulate yourself. Psychologists, counselors, social workers will be very familiar with the concept of self-talk. We all have internal dialogues within us. So what is it that, what are you saying to yourself? What do you do when you know that you're stressed out? Whether do you have like a self-care plan? Whether do you actually work in building your self-resilience? So under P is really a lot about that. And then R is really talking about rhythm, and, without really spending too much time and just providing very basic handles, it's really talking about how are you really spending your time, like in terms of your diet, are you resting enough, how are you even your rhythm at work, how are you working, your work habits, and lastly, very importantly, which I think everybody would need to hear, this is screen time, because studies have shown screen time do affect your mental health as well. I will stand for interpersonal bonds, and we really want people to. An important part about burnout is also for you to rediscover the joy of relationships again. Start relating with people, and go and volunteer, whatever, and really start bonding with people. S stands for support, and sometimes people going through burnout, whether they are at the spectrum where they are not burning out yet at the preventive side, or whether they are burning out, we do actually, especially if they are burning out, they may not have the bandwidth to actually handle going through some of these things, and that's where we feel that they should actually journey alongside with maybe a mental health professional. That they could see a counselor. They could look for someone who could provide them pastoral counseling, for example, in their place of worship, in their religion, whether it's a pastor or whoever, and of course last M, and that M is really stands for meaning, and we really hope that people to find meaning in the work that they do, or to even find meaning in the little things in their life. And I think sometimes that will help to inject back meaning that burnout has kind of stolen away. You kind of feel like you're going through the routine, and the routine, it just feels so meaningless sometimes, and you just need to find that meaning again.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very structured way and easy to understand way to actually go through and Prism. Now I understand how it actually can help me.
Yeah, and we like the imagery also, because kind of like just like when a light shines through and a beautiful spectrum comes out. Really a lot of things of why we do what we do in my social enterprise is we believe that people are meant to thrive, and that beautiful things can come out of people, and so the Prism model is just a very nice image of that, that something beautiful come out of it. And so it's really, we hope that people will come out of burnout, I'm not saying that it's easy to do, and that's why we guide people through different aspects of prism and to kind of see whether which part of it that they are actually needing work on. Yeah, certain areas I have to agree that it really requires a lot of deep work, and that's where, like I mentioned, getting support from mental health professionals actually would be helpful. Yeah,
Definitely. And I think from your experience as well, burnout can happen more than once, right? And especially if you have gone through a process of healing for the first time, it does it get harder on the second time and so on?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you asked. You know, and I mean, I always tell people that I'm quite an expert at burning out. I mean, I can tell you how to burn out. You can get burnout more than once, but okay. I mean, I feel for my own journey, you know, I've actually burnt out not from the same reasons.
Okay.
Each of the different burnout, I've actually learned an important life lesson for myself. You know, and I've actually grew as a person. So I think the answer that I would like to say is that I believe it should get easier for you. You know, just like how I mentioned that sometimes I might catch myself at the beginning of burnout. You know, and I catch myself and I know what to do about it. And I think your process would be faster of catching that. And but that being said, unless of course you didn't quite learn your lesson in the first burnout, you know, then there is a possibility that you could go through the burnout a second time, and you could take equally long, if not longer, as well. So I think the important thing is that if you could, you know, at the very beginning when you find that you're burning out, then do something about it, you know, and you kind of like what some people say, you can spare yourself the agony, you know, of going through a long drawn burnout that could actually develop into depression, you know, if not well taken care of.
Yeah, and again, it's a lot about the self-awareness part of it, and knowing that where you are, what capacity you are in, what space, what kind of space you are in at the moment.
So like what kind of like, apart from like mental health professionals, what kind of support someone who is suffering from burnout like will need?
Well, I know going to see a mental health professional could be quite a big step for some people, you know, and people may not be comfortable about that. And I guess that's where there are some other resources, like for example, there are hotlines available that people could call. People would know about SOS, you know, and some of these other hotlines. And if someone is, for example, in the military forces, there's also the SAF hotline. If you are studying, I believe that you also have the university health services on campus, and they usually would, either that or the student union usually would have some kind of hotline that you could actually call in as well to get some help. And I guess that's quite a easy stepping stone for a lot of people, because you don't quite need to actually take a big step of seeing someone, you know, and then and I know it's difficult, so at least calling in would be easy. Some hotline like SOS actually operates for 24 hours, so it's easy to call through. Whereas, so it's actually good to find out. I mean, maybe one way of self-helping is to find out what the different resources are, and also find out whether what are the operating hours of some of these not suicide, but rather some of these help hotlines.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, because like I say, SOS is 24 hours, but some hotlines actually only operate for specific hours of the day.
Right.
So it's good to call and find out.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure like what you have mentioned, there are actually adequate resources out there for us to reach out already. And I think this the getting there, the first step to actually make that call, meet your mental health professional. It's what is hard. And I think, like you also mentioned in your prism model, the support and interpersonal relationships as well. Like you really need that peer-to-peer level of understanding as well, and being sensitive around your social network. Like let's say if you identify that, hey, you potentially could be, you know, going through a burnout phase, you know, maybe encouraging that person to actually seek professional help. If at a peer-to-peer level, it doesn't really help at that level. It's also important. I think the support is really important, at least for me.
Yeah, it is definitely.
Yeah. And on that note, I think how would you advise, let's say, at work, right? All the managers or in a leadership or management position, how can they be sensitive when they're working with people under them or in their environment that, hey, your employee is actually potentially having burnout? You know, what are the ways that they can actually, according to your professional advice, what advice would you give them to help them be more aware of their environment?
Well, if we go back to self-awareness first,
Right.
but in this case, it's really being aware of the symptoms of burnout, and really looking at whether your team members are really experiencing some of these, especially if you know that they're going through a very prolonged period of stress, like a very stressful project, all the more you need to be a little bit more sensitive, and you ask yourself that question. You could actually start working in strategies to also help people to kind of rest as well. So there are many strategies that I've read online and also in books. I even read about how some organizations even have coverage. Like for example, they actually allow a staff to have rest days or even
Right.
so like they don't have to worry because another staff will cover for that staff while they actually go and rest, but they make it kind of a regular period of rest for that person, and they rotate it among the team members. I believe it requires a little bit of creativity.
Yeah.
But definitely one thing I want people to know is that mental well-being really goes beyond just having snack cabinets and gaming stations. I mean, those are very good, but like you mentioned, I think sometimes the checking in of colleagues, not just, and I think it's not just about the managers, but also the people around, like whether you actually see whether your colleague is actually could be going through a very tough time. Another thing I think that could be very helpful is really going upstream, and whether could you even, like for example, cover about mental health and resilience even at the point in time when the staff joins a company, make it as part of, for example, the orientation,
Right.
So that they get educated about what burnout is and what they can do about it. But yes, ultimately, that's only the personal resilience part. There's still things that organizations can do in terms of like looking out for one another, or even some organizations that I spoke to are even as they are even as serious as wanting to put in place kind of like a support structure. They may even want to look into policies like having like recoup time, for you to rest after a major project, or having flexible work arrangement, especially for someone who could be burning out or experiencing some difficulties at home, So I think there are different strategies, but important thing is managers should also, and management sometimes should also know that with a very healthy workforce, that's where you also would be able to thrive. Because someone once said before, your organization is as healthy as your workforce.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So
It's true.
So I believe it's a worthy investment to look into, and also to look into how you could actually build the mental well-being resilience of the staff, and even look at the team. What can the team do?
Definitely. And I think it's really back to the whole process of communication as well. How do you actually have it in place and structure so that all these issues will be raised up at the root of it, and not wait until it snowballs and then by the time it potentially can be a bit too late. Right?
It's exactly like when I was reading up about some articles, it talked about like, if you don't tell your superiors, how can they know what you're going through?
Yeah,
so you should really just say. But like all this talk about work and stuff, but like, do students actually get burned out as well?
Well, yeah, it's a good question, because if you do look at what a lot of definitions of burnout online, actually, it's really focused on job burnout. But my point of view is that anybody who is kind of doing work, whether in a salaried capacity, that means you're getting money for it, or not, you could burn out.
Yeah.
Because think about it, a volunteer does work, right?
Yeah.
But they're not salaried, so they're prone to burnout. Caregivers, people who are caring for people at home, could burn out. Parents could burn out. Students could burn out, because it requires quite a bit of work to study, right? It requires mental resources, it requires time, it requires effort. So students could burn out as well. And recently I had a very interesting conversation with job coaches as well. And they actually said that there's even such a thing called job seekers burnout. I mean,
Really?
if you think about it, that's the job of a job seeker, right? That they're actually looking for work, in the working hours. They are not getting salary for that, but they are actually doing work, trying to find jobs and all that. And I think it's interesting, it does open my eyes. And I think it's not so much about just having burnout at work, but in any part of your life where you are putting in effort to do something, and if you go through a prolonged period of stress, you could essentially have burnout. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. So just to wrap things up here, so what would be one advice that you would give to our listeners out there who is either perhaps going through burnout or maybe in the phase that I could potentially, hey, after hearing this, I think I am going through burnout. What advice would you give to the listeners out there?
I think maybe one of the things that I would say is don't fear burnout. Burnout is overcomable, and actually I always feel good can come out of burnout. Like in my case where I'm actually currently working with people with burnout, and so so it's not something to be feared or something that is negative. So if you do find that you could be experiencing burnout, talk to someone. I mean, talk to a friend, talk to your superior if the opportunities are there, and seek help. Or just you could just head on over to our website, to just get some resources on how you could actually recognize burnout and how you can deal with burnout.
Right. Sorry. So thank you so much, James, for joining us on this episode of Burnout. And I think if you like to find more about how you can deal with burnout, you can always find out on his website, which is www.emmaus.sg. Right. And then let me spell it out for our listeners out there, which is www.emmaus.sg. And once again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. And that's all for this episode of Spill the Tea with THG. And do remember to catch us on Facebook and Instagram and follow us on Spotify as well. Until then, we talk to you soon. Bye.